Good afternoon. This is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. We are going to be live in a little bit. We are live now. We'll have Moira Rader on today. She's a candidate in the, oh, shoot, I think she's in the 98th. I put 102nd. Sorry about that. She's in the 98th district. We'll have her on in a second. Before we get started, our sponsor today is GW Carson's. We just posted earlier their new happy hour menu. So check that out on Brantford 7 and then check them out. Actually, Half Price Apps, a very good happy hour menu they have there. So if you haven't been there in a while, and I hear from a lot of people they haven't been to Carson's in quite some time, it might be time to check it out again. The second thing I have to promote is tonight from 6 to 9 at the Parthenon Diner is something called Day of the Dogs, the fundraiser to help animals in need, the Dan Cosgrove Animal Shelter. It says anyone coming to the event should bring a photo of their pet dressed up in a Halloween costume so we can enter you into our drawing of the Day of the Dogs Pet Photo Contest. There'll be first prizes given to the cutest, scariest, and most original. Tickets are $30 and include appetizers, wine, live music all night long. So if you want to go party at the Parthenon Diner and support the Dan Cosgrove Animal Shelter, that's at 6 to 9 tonight at the Parthenon. So worth checking out. But for now, I'll bring Moira on. Moira, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
First time for you. I think for a lot of our viewers, you're going to be a new face that they may have not seen before. Just to be clear, this isn't your fault. When I did the caption for today, I put the 102nd district. You're the 98th district. You're running for Sean Scalen's former seat. Robin Comey and Ray Graham are the 102nd. So I just want to make that clear. That's my mistake. But that being said, welcome to politics on this level. I know you're serving locally in Guilford. The 98th district is most of Guilford and 2 districts in Brantford. So basically Pine Orchard and Stony Creek are covered there. So first, we be crazy to say that we are also understanding you have big shoes to fill. Sean was a very effective legislator here for a long time, was on this show many, many times, very knowledgeable, newest stuff. So really big shoes to fill, and we're glad to see him moving on to larger stuff. Yeah. But that said, I want to give you a few minutes to tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your background, where you serve now in Guilford, and some of that experience. So go ahead.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I think the first time we got to meet was on the Brantford Green making Zeppeli bread dough. So this is a nice opportunity to talk about things. Yes, I'm Moira Rader. My husband and I have 4 kids. They're all teenagers right now. My oldest is in college, and my 3 girls are here in the Guilford Public Schools. In terms of my background, I have an undergrad in fine art and art history, and then went on to grad school and studied architecture at Columbia's Graduate School of Architecture, where I specialized in architectural conservation and historic preservation. And then worked in Manhattan for several years for a large firm there doing that kind of work. Working on landmark buildings throughout Manhattan and the greater metro area. And then my husband, who's also an architect, and he had relocated up here to the Hartford area. So we moved up here. And I worked with Hoffman Architects for a while. Had the opportunity to work on the actual Capitol building in DC, which was a very small part of that, but it was a really interesting project. And then moved on to Amenta M Architects, where I led their interior architecture department for many years. And like I said, my husband's an architect, and so professions kind of moved us around. And we actually moved down to South Carolina for a year. And when we were coming back, we'd always loved the shoreline. And so we specifically chose Guilford for a lot of the reasons a lot of other families do. Great schools. Our kids were young then, and really wonderful opportunity to live in a shoreline community. And as any mom with kids does, you join the PTO, or at least I did, because I wanted to meet people. And as soon as you start giving your time, they start giving you more work. And quickly was on the advisory board there and the treasurer for several years. Volunteered at my church, Sunday school teaching for years. And just through that, got involved in other nonprofits in the community. And then in 2016, my dear friend and our current state senator, Christine Cohn, was serving on the Board of Education and said, hey, there's an opening coming up, and I really think you should consider it. I've known you for years. I've seen what you've done in this community, and I think you'd be a real asset. And so I ran in 2016 and won that seat, served for a 4-year term, and then and in that time was named chair of the policy committee and served on the operations committee because of my architectural background. That was an asset there. And this past year, we had a very challenging election, to say the least. And we won that handily and won re-election. I won re-election. I was the only incumbent running on that ticket, and now serve as the vice chair on the Board of Ed. And I've known Sean for years, and obviously Christine for years. And through all of that involvement, have really gotten connected in the community and built some really great relationships. And when Sean considered his political move, he actually came to me and talked to me, as did many other community members, and said, would you consider this? And I believe that there's no such thing as luck. It's like opportunity meets preparation. And I was ready for a new challenge in my life, career-wise, and it was the right timing. And so I've jumped in full force. And I had a primary in the spring and summer, won that, and moved on to the general election. And here I am.
Okay, so a few questions just so we have the timeline right. You moved to Guilford in what year?
2012.
Okay.
Yep.
And are you working? I know you're an architect or work in architecture. Are you working now?
I am not, and I will share with you the reason why. I'm very open about this. Back in late 2019, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so at the time, I'd also gotten my real estate license in 2015-16 and was working as an affiliate with Sotheby's. Was diagnosed with breast cancer, early caught, but serious. And I actually had my first surgery in December of 2019, and then was recuperating from that. And then I had my second surgery March 3rd, and we went into lockdown for the pandemic 2 weeks later. So as I recovered, I had a course of 4 surgeries throughout almost 1 calendar year. And I just felt at the time, for my health and my healing, being in a pandemic and showing homes with masks and gloves was not safe. And so stepped back from that, but continued right with the Board of Ed. I think I missed 1 meeting throughout all of my treatments. And like I said, timing is everything. Got through that, got my kids ushered through the pandemic. We hopefully come out of that. And this opportunity came along, and it was right for me. I was ready for a new challenge. So,
no, the question wasn't about give a reason why you're not working. I didn't know if you were working or not.
No,
you mentioned career change, so I'm like, okay, this is a part-time job. I know it's full-time hours for the most part, but it's a part-time job. And many people do.
Right. What's nice about what I do as an architect and a designer is, when I was many years ago, I did have a small private practice. I was doing a lot of residential work. And that's something I help clients with from time to time. I don't have a full-time practice, but it's definitely something I can jump back into, as well as real estate. I put my license into referral for the past few years, but that's something I could go back to. And they both have a lot of flexibility. So being a state legislator, it wouldn't, impede me from doing that when time allowed.
Okay. I want to talk to you, one, about the difference in coming here and then getting on the PTO because of the kids, and the Board of Education, obviously, for the kids. This is not necessarily for the kids. This is a much larger step. When Sean and others came to you, was there something on your mind that you said, this is what I want to fight for? This is the reason I want to run for this office?
Yeah, well, I have to say that my husband and I both have always believed in public service and giving back to our community. And that's kind of what we both did the minute we got to this community. He has served on the standing building committee, for example, for 8 years. And so I was wanting something that I felt was more fulfilling and that I could give back to the community. And also I wanted to be challenged. I saw a lot of really amazing progress that Sean and Christine had accomplished on behalf of our community. And I wanted to continue and usher that in. There are issues that are very specific to our district. But I think they also connect, obviously, to the larger needs around our state. And I felt like I was, like I said, I do feel like I'm prepared for this. I'm ready for this. I understand what the issues are. I'm very involved in the community. So I hear from a lot of different voices. And so, it's a representative job. And so you're representing your constituents. It's not about my personal agenda. But I definitely feel I'm tapped into, the concerns of the folks that I'll be representing.
Now, to those in Brantford that may not be familiar with what happened in Guilford the last election, although that's not saying they weren't impacted by the CRT discussion, was a national discussion. Guilford oddly enough, almost became a national spotlight because of what was happening in that election. Talk to me about your viewpoint. You were running. You can give us some of the background of what happened, but from a town standpoint, from a Board of Ed standpoint, an actual curriculum standpoint, what was the impact of that controversial election overall on the school system?
In terms of the impact on the school system, if anything, it strengthened it. I feel that, I had to say what came out of a very contentious, time in our community, really, it was an incredible coming together of our community around our school district and around our teachers and our administrators and us as board members. We were under a lot of false attacks and false allegations, and it was a very small group of voices, but they were very vocal and, wanted to dismantle our school district, wanted to, making claims about our curriculum that were false, just like you said, much the narrative that we were seeing across the country. But what was different here, and I think the reason it garnered so much attention is because of this groundswell of community support around us and about our strategy around our campaign. We ran a fusion campaign, if you will, of independents and Democrats together, 2 Democrats and 3 independents. So it was a very unique approach. And what it did is it really connected with the larger community. Not everyone identifies as affiliated party. And so I think what we spoke to was, let's put that aside and let's talk about what our Guilford schools represent and what we stand for and what we want to provide for our students. And that really is what garnered the support. We won over 2-1 in terms of votes. We had the largest voter turnout in the state. And I personally received the largest number of votes ever on record for a municipal election. And that's not because of me. It's because so much support rallied around us.
So, moving forward, as much as that is, yes, a small group of people with loud voices managed, that's often how change happens, whether it's good or bad change to be determined. That's likely to continue at the state level. Are there, what I'm trying to figure out as someone interviewing a new candidate is, what will you stand for in Hartford? What are the things that you will tell your constituents, this is my focus? Robin Comey has early childhood education. Right? Everybody has their thing. What is your focus in Hartford? We have your education background here. Are we going to use that in Hartford? Are there specific issues
I would like to? I would like to. I feel like, I've got a strong toolkit in terms of our public education system here in the state. I have a really strong understanding of it, and I have a strong understanding of it on a local level. So I definitely think that would be an asset in Hartford. Look, I'm going to be a freshman, so I'm going to request where I want to be, but they're going to put me where they need me, and that's fine. Given my background in architecture, I'm very interested in housing, affordable housing. I'm interested in infrastructure and transportation. I think, I was just in a forum yesterday morning with our chambers of commerce along the shoreline and talking about, workforce redevelopment and how does that tie to affordable housing and how's it tie to transportation. It's all connected. And so I think I've got a good wheelhouse of background professionally and just an understanding of those issues. So I could be an asset for those issues. And the other unique thing, sadly or not, is, safe gun legislation. It touched our community very closely with Ethan Song, and I'd like to see that we continue to work on that and strengthen it even more. And honestly, one of the biggest issues I get on knocking doors is women healthcare rights and choice, making sure that we're working at protecting that, and environmental issues. Those are like key local issues. And then healthcare, affordable healthcare. I hear about that a lot. People are really worried about these insurance company rates going way up, and how are we going to manage that? And mental health care. I mentioned I have 4 kids, and I saw what the pandemic did to our kids and our students. They weren't the only ones touched, but they were very significantly touched. And I'm encouraged by the legislation the state put forward around mental health for children, but I'd like to see us continue to look at that. So there's a lot, but that's kind of.
Well, it is. So one question we'll come back to in a second, because I want to talk about affordable housing, which if you're on this podcast, you probably knew we were going to talk about affordable housing. But because it impacts Branford and Guilford, it has a process moving forward. But one of the questions I'm going to ask you later, and you could think about this, is where would you differ from the standard Democratic stances on a lot of those issues that you mentioned? Because Guilford has moved a little bit further left in the last couple of years. And in many of those things are Democratic talking points. I'd like to see where you may differ with your own party on some things. But before we get there, with your architecture background, talk to me about affordable housing. Now, the issue is we have this law.
Yep.
Guilford, Brantford both have less than 10% of their housing stock as designated the legal definition of affordable housing. We can debate what the word affordable means, but the legal definition. Do you feel that law puts our towns in any sort of disadvantage when it comes to developers coming in?
I think it's very different for each of the towns. I think that the assets and the current, demographics of each town is different, but also the housing, supply that we currently have. So in Guilford, 8-30G, while they require 10%, can be challenging because a lot of our space that's open space is protected. We have a strong Guilford land trust, and so a lot of that property is protected. But we do have 3 projects in Guilford that are kind of in the pipeline. One is on Hubbard Road, which is right near the highway across from our school bus depot. And that's a private developer. He's come in under the 830G guidance. And
I believe 30% are affordable on that one.
Yes. And so it's 30% will be affordable. Half of, I think it's about 100 units, but they're only 1-bedroom units. So half will be 55 plus, and the other will not be age regulated. And 30% overall will be affordable. And so, design wise, there wasn't as much control. And I come from that perspective. I think that I do believe that I hate the stigma around the word affordable housing because I think it is a cornerstone of any community. And I don't understand. I understand the pushback, but I don't agree with it because I think that if done correctly, it can be such an asset for the town. And I bring that up because 2 other projects in Guilford, one is a property that was previously owned by the town, and it's near the fairgrounds. It's near the train station. It's going to be a smaller development. It's going to be 16 units, but it's being done by a nonprofit who has done this before in Guilford, actually 30 years ago. And they're going to use a local architect who's going to design it to be very amenable with the architecture styles of the neighborhood. And then there's another one, a small developer up on State Street who's doing a small condo village where certain units will have deed restrictions, which will mean that that cost of that unit must always stay quote unquote affordable. So those are all different types that are all happening in Guilford. But even with that, I think Guilford will only get to like under 3%. And so you're still not meeting that legislation. Whereas in Brantford, and I've heard you talk about this, and I agree with you, a lot of the current housing stock falls into that category. And, you have many trailer park developments or apartment building developments, and
including, by the way, in your district.
Yes.
In Stony Creek. Yeah. I mean, there's,
Yeah, we have apartments, and we have another affordable housing development that was developed 30 years ago by the same nonprofit that's doing this one near the fairgrounds. So that's where I can understand where communities are like, hold on a second, like we've got this inventory already, and putting this burden upon us, it needs to be looked at. I guess my point is by community basis, and there needs to be some more I think there should be some more flexibility. Now, am I like a legal scholar on this legislation yet? No, and I wouldn't claim to be, but I'm interested to see how you can make it more attractive for communities to want to participate in, but also how you can financially make it viable. And most importantly, that you understand the demographics of that community and what that community needs. I think that it is a key to making our communities more diverse in terms of socioeconomic backgrounds. I think it's going to attract more folks into, we live in really great towns. We're very fortunate. We have great schools in both communities. We have great public services in both communities and amenities. And we need to make that reachable for more people. We just do.
I agree. And I'm glad to hear you recite back one of the arguments I've made many times on not counting some of that stock. It's amazing. You have in your district I mean, Christine has this because she has such a large district with her Senate
Yeah.
district, but Brantford are different and Guilford are very different with the overall
Yeah.
economic brackets that they're in. And often they're put together in this category of these wealthy shoreline towns. Brantford isn't quite, it has the Thimble Islands, it has the shoreline, but it doesn't have all the trailer parks that we have, all the condos that we have. It actually is far more diverse. So those
Right.
needs are different. From a legislative standpoint, I know you'll be a freshman, but changing that definition or doing something to give towns like Brantford and even more diverse towns like Milford has this problem. Not Orange as much, but there's other towns that have similar problems like this. Would you support legislation like that?
I definitely want to be a part of the conversation. Like that's not me being non-committal, but like that's me. Like I'm not going to sit here and say I know I have all the answers because I don't. But yes,
Well, you've shown that you understand the issue, though, so I could
I
understand.
do. I understand it, and so I want to understand how did they land here? How did they land here with this? Blanket legislation that was supposed to apply to like 169 different towns. Like, how was that thought through? Like, what was the thought process behind that? Because it's like saying everyone wear the same coat. It's going to keep you all warm. It's going to work for everybody. It's not.
Exactly.
So,
right. Okay.
but I'm not trying to be evasive. I'm just saying like, absolutely. I would want to sit down and see how we can make this work better.
So you did a chamber discussion. I did not see the chamber event, but you have business experience. Your husband has business experience. I'm sure the conversation in the house has a lot to do with business and the economy. Talk about business along the shoreline and what issues you're seeing that business owners are talking to you about.
Yeah, well, obviously impacts of the pandemic. Coming back from that, some businesses fared better than others. Workforce is a big issue. Being able to fill positions and fill them with qualified employees trained in that, in that discipline. I think a lot of folks are like understaffed and would love to, build that up more. And I think what we're seeing too is people's lifestyles have changed. Post pandemic, I'm one of those people, where like you kind of change what you did on a Friday night with your family and a Saturday afternoon with your family. So I'm hearing a lot of that, like, they've got jobs to fill and they can't fill them. Inflation is hurting. Restaurants are having, the food costs are going up, so they're having to charge more. And how do they keep their customers happy? And, the supply chain issues with small businesses. How do we reckon? And I realize that a lot of this is beyond a state level control of how to fix everything. But I'm also really encouraged because I know that we, post pandemic, we had an influx of folks moving here who have, and I know in Guilford alone, and in Brantford, the housing market has been nuts for the last few years because, we've had such an influx of folks who are bringing their business ideas and small businesses. So I feel like we're really perched in a good place. But what I think we need to identify, and we're talking about this in the chamber, is if you can attract folks here, to live here and start their businesses, you have to provide housing that they can afford. You have to provide a means to and from, if they're working out of Manhattan or New Haven, or their business makes them travel, we've got Tweed now. But how do you create that infrastructure around that? The traffic on 95 is unbearable sometimes in the summer, so how do you, I know I keep coming to this thing where everything's interconnected, but like as an architect, you always are looking at all the facets that go into a successful project. And I think business is reliant on a lot of these other factors in order to succeed.
So is there something that you have seen or an idea you have or one that someone else has presented that you would latch on to and advocate for?
In terms of business or just all the things I touched on?
Business.
Well, I think, what I've heard from folks is that the startup cost and the tax implications for small businesses can be challenging. So I'd love to understand that better and take a look at that. I know that, in talking to some friends who own small businesses, the minimum wage has, although I am a proponent, I believe in that. I think that is a fair, that is absolutely something we should stand by, is how do small businesses under a certain employee number, a certain profit, level, or how do they manage that? Right. And how do we support that? if we're going to require it, much like we talked about 830G, how do you then help small businesses be viable? Because not everyone can afford that. So things like that, they're basic, but they're really important.
So, I think what I look for when I'm interviewing somebody, and I hope the audience looks for, is that somebody seems to have an understanding of the issues.
Yeah.
And I have been a huge advocate of understanding economics and business to understand politics. You can't understand one without the other.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying that.
Absolutely.
What now answer the question of your answers are Democratic answers. You support the minimum wage. You support a lot of the Democratic things. I've seen some of your Facebook posts. Give me an area where you have differed with the Democratic Party or some of the leadership stances on some things in the state or even nationally.
It's a good question. It's a really good question. I was endorsed by the Working Families Party, and they definitely are more they are openly progressive about their issues, and they really advocate for working families, and union representation and, labor rights. And I feel I'm very, and thankfully I've been endorsed by numerous groups, AFL-CIO, AFSCME, other groups. And I don't know if this isn't necessarily not democratic, but I am a huge proponent of unionized labor. My mother's a retired teacher. I like to know that, I would always stand behind those kinds of efforts and institutions and advocate for that. And I don't know if every time, and I hate speaking for anyone else in the Democratic Party, but I know for me, I don't know if every time that aligns with every member of our party. I'll be completely transparent. Up until probably 7 or 8 years ago, I was unaffiliated because I always voted my conscience and I always voted Democratic, but I never had the need to declare a party. But this is pre the past administration, but where I saw things going, I knew I needed to identify with, and I do identify as a Democrat, and I'm very proud of that. But I think, there are more moderates in our party and there are more progressive folks in our party. And I think around labor, that's where sometimes you see things part ways a little bit. So maybe, I don't know if that's a good enough answer for you, but that's something that comes to mind to me right away.
Well, put yourself in the shoes of some. Now, I understand Guilford is moving significantly left. Brantford's kind of middle of the road. Well, there's a Democratic advantage in the town, but it's middle of the road. Put yourself in the shoes of a Republican or a conservative in Stony Creek or Pine Orchard, where there's a lot of Republicans. Why would they feel comfortable coming to you with an issue if you're pretty much going to follow the left side?
Well, I think, you'd have to get to know me better to know that I'm not really a follower, and I'm not really someone who, like I said, who always followed a strict party, principled line. It feels weird to talk about myself this way, but I'm very honest. I'm very transparent. I'm very approachable. Anyone who's worked with me on the Board of Education or in the community, I mean, you can, and I have nothing to do with the letters to the editor, but what keeps coming over and over again is that, I listen to people. I take in opinions from both sides. You brought up the race we had last year, and what really ramped up to that was a lot of community involvement around our work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that phrase can be very polarizing. It shouldn't be, but it is. And I feel like it navigated that really well. And I never felt like I alienated anybody. I mean, granted, when you have to campaign, it feels different. But I believe to this day, if anyone walks up to me in the grocery store, Republican, unaffiliated, independent, I'm happy to talk to them, and I have. I've not purposely knocked on doors of Republicans just to introduce myself, and I've not had a negative interaction. So I hope that people, as they get to know me, and I think that's where Sean has a really great strength, and I admire that about him, and I would hope to model my candidacy and my seat the same way. There's some things that people will always say, well, that's a Democratic, platform, but I guess that's all I can offer to you is that I think if people get to know me and trust me and speak to others about me and get to know that that's really where I sit about things, Yeah, I'm not I'm not a politician, but I'm really not. I'm a public servant. And, I know I'm part of a party, but I'll represent what my community wants. Republican, Democrat, independent, unaffiliated. That's my job.
Okay. All right. So I'll give you the same thing I said to Robin yesterday.
Okay.
Give me your sales pitch. We're on an elevator and you want my vote. You would say what?
Okay. Well, beyond just, good to meet you on the elevator, is that I believe, and I've used this tagline in my campaign, but it really only came to a few weeks ago, is leadership matters. And I really believe that I have dedicated the last decade of my life happily to serving my community. I always say that volunteerism is a selfish sport because I get so much out of what I do in my community, the hours and the meetings and meeting with folks. And now being a candidate and the campaign, I truly enjoy that. But what that means is that I have prepared myself for this position. I have created the relationships that will hopefully enable me to be a very powerful representative in our legislature for our district. And I've expressed my leadership skills, and I have the professional maturity and background to, pivot to different committees and different issues. But most importantly, I'm invested in this community. I love it here. I'm raising my family here. I've built relationships here and roots here, and it matters to me that I will be representing everyone here. And so I hope that they can trust that I am a genuine person, that I'm prepared, and that I will be a very strong leader for them at the State House.
All right. Well, we're at our floor, so we may have to get off the elevator now. But it's nice to meet you too, Moira. Thank you for coming on. I
Yes,
appreciate it. If there are more
anytime.
questions or issues come up, are we open to ask you back?
Okay, great.
Okay,
I'd love it.
perfect.
All right.
That being said, thank you very much, and good luck in the race.
Thank you. Take
We'll
care.
talk to you soon. All right. All right. So thank you to Moira for coming on. Interesting discussion. I had not met. I met her. I managed the fried dough booth at the festival this year. I met her for the first time then, but we didn't really talk issues or what have you. She's straightforward when it comes to being left. That's where she is. That's kind of where Guilford's going. But it is kind of encouraging that she has significant business experience, significant education. She did go through, for the life of me in that election in Guilford, I don't know where the accusations were coming from. It got so nasty, but I didn't see any evidence in talking to many teachers in Guilford of actually CRT being taught. So that was an interesting race to go through. And it became a national thing. Guilford became a national name. I think either Fox News or a right-wing organization promoted that. But the outcome was what it was, and not really surprising that was going to happen. So it's interesting. She's very likely the heavy favorite to win in that race. And so we did have Rich scheduled. We will still look to schedule him in the near future and get him on as well. But the numbers are the numbers. So there's no surprise there. So she'll likely be Sean's replacement. And Sean has big shoes to fill. Sean really was, as much as he is left, he's moving up the Democratic ranks. He also worked well with the other side. He got his respect from the other side. Republicans were okay talking to Sean and working with him. He was very good at that. And so if she wants to try to duplicate that, I wish her well in doing that and hope she's successful in that regard. I'm not picking someone for the race, but in that regard. That being said, it is past 4:30. We will be back tomorrow with our rescheduled one of Paul Chrissy. He'll be on. We did a technical check. We know everything works. We'll have him on at 4 o'clock. And we'll try to get answers on some questions from him tomorrow. He's running against Christine Cohen. And then next week, we'll have Christine Cohen. We don't know what day yet, but we'll have her next week. That being said, guys, I hope everybody has a great night, and I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great evening. Oh, by the way, if you can get to that fundraiser at the Parthenon from 6 to 9, $30 a ticket, food, and apparently dancing to support the animal shelter. Maybe I'll stop by.